intertwines with mistakes you can't erase.
Hi everyone, and welcome to lesson 4 of the IGCSE lessons on skill acquisition and psychology. And today we move away from skill acquisition and into the psychology part of this topic. So we're going to be starting with looking at motivation today. We're going to cover what motivation is, the different types of motivation, and how it can affect performers and other people involved in sport. So we're going to make a start with motivation, and we're going to firstly consider two different types of motivation. So first one is intrinsic and the second one is extrinsic. So what I'd like you to do in the note section on the right hand side is consider what you think the differences are. So previously when we looked at feedback, we looked at the two different types of feedback being intrinsic and extrinsic. So this may help you when you come up with your, when you think about what you might describe these two types of motivation as. So what do you think intrinsic motivation is, and what do you think extrinsic motivation is? If you write your notes in the comment section on the right hand side and submit them, before we move on to the next slide, we'll find out what they mean. Okay, so we're going to start with intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation can be described as a feeling from within, an individual's drive and willpower to do or engage in something. So anything that a person feels and provides them with the drive to do something, so something that comes from within, an inner feeling. They tend to do it for fun, enjoyment and challenge. So the participation in the event or the challenge or the task is normally driven by fun, enjoyment and challenge. And it's normally internally rewarding, so they get some form of satisfaction or passion from doing what they've set out to do. So whether it is winning a race, it might be because it makes them feel satisfied as being a winner, or it might be because they truly enjoy running. Or sometimes it could be a mixture of both. This is genuinely a good starting point for people that are new to an activity or want to try a new exercise or a new sport. Intrinsic motivation is really important at the start to build a love and a passion for the sport to enable them to continue to develop. So intrinsic motivation is any form of motivation that comes from within. So I'm going to show you a quick video now from some previous NBA professionals. I wonder if you know who they are, and they're going to be talking about their love and passion for their sport.
The greatest thing about the game of basketball to me is the passion, the love that I have for it.
The passion came from the love for the game. You know, I loved everything about it, like the smell of the ball.
Because when you have love for anything, you'll go to the extreme to maintain that love.
Ball going through the net, like all those things I love.
That's what love does. It loves drives you to do everything you need to maintain that connection. If I didn't have the love for the game of basketball, all the things that I just panned out to you in my career would have never been achievable for me.
Once you have that love, you just want to be a part of this thing all the time.
But it was truly my love for the game that kept me pushing to be the best basketball player that I could be. To be the best at anything, you gotta have a certain love for that to make you overcome all the obstacles that's gonna be thrown in your way.
So there we had Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, arguably two of the best ever basketball players, talking about their love for the game, their internal or their intrinsic motivation to be the best they possibly can be. And their reasoning is because they truly loved the game that they played, the satisfaction and enjoyment of playing. And they equate all of their successes to the fact that they truly loved the game they played and it was all internal. So although it's important for beginners to start when they're starting out in a new sport to find a love for the sport, it's also important for people that perform to the top levels to maintain that passion and hunger for the sport to be as successful as they possibly can be. So now we're going to move on to extrinsic motivation. Okay, so extrinsic motivation is the terminology we use when a performer is driven by external sources. So extrinsic motivation can be described or defined as behavior that is driven by external rewards and external sources. Things like this. So generally, normally money, prizes and trophies are things that can motivate people to perform and motivate people to want to participate in certain events. Also, people that are extrinsically motivated like the idea of being praised, and they sort of build a reputation for themselves, so they build a prestige, and sometimes obviously being the best in your area or in your sport can lead to you becoming very famous and building a good reputation. So you'll see many elite performers can be motivated by the opportunity to win opens and major titles and championships and leagues, because this allows them to build a good reputation, and it also boosts their ego. As we know, many sports performers have quite big egos and lots of self-confidence. So extrinsic motivation is when a performer is motivated by external sources and rewards such as money, prizes and trophy, but it also boosts their reputation, their ego and how they feel about themselves. I'm going to show you a quick video now just to reflect upon that.
I used to go to the gym with my father to watch my brother training. My father asked me one day whether I would like to try one of the moves of weightlifting. I did what he asked me to do, and he was very impressed with the way I lifted the weights. He told me that I had a talent. I continued to train after that and took part in national and international competitions. Winning an Olympic medal is my dream, and the dream of every athlete. It is my desire to win an Olympic medal to raise the profile of Iraq in the international arena. Hopefully I will achieve this desire.
Although Kara and teammates have to train at substandard facilities, he's hopeful of bringing more gold medals back to Iraq and making his father proud.
So that's a story of an Iraqi weightlifter who has been extremely motivated by the chance of winning medals and increasing his reputation and increasing the reputation of his country as well. So he is extremely motivated by the chance of winning medals in competitions, but there's also a little bit of internal intrinsic motivation there as well, because he wants to do his father proud and he wants to feel like he's done his father proud. So he's got a bit of a mixture of both. So it's important to consider that performers aren't using predominantly one type of motivation, they can use a mixture of both. So in this slide we're going to be looking at the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is generally considered to be the most long-lasting, the most poignant, and tends to affect the most people. Intrinsic motivation tends to carry a lot of value, feelings from within and what people are passionate about and interested in, and satisfaction really carry a lot of value and motivate people to do a vast array of things, and therefore can affect more people, because everyone tends to have something that they're motivated to try and achieve, and they're not always participating in something to be the winner or to win medals or rewards. Whereas extrinsic motivation tends to have more of an effect on individuals who perform at a higher level, so the top professional athletes. When performers have got to this level, they are very confident in their own abilities, and their drive to become the best is really quite valuable to them, and they use the motivation of winning trophies and winning medals and being successful and building a good reputation and being known as the best player in the world. They use all of these extrinsic forms of motivation to drive them forward to be the best they possibly can be. So it's important for us to consider, as people that may work with young children or beginners in sport as teachers or coaches, that intrinsic motivation should be the focus and the starting point for young children participating in sport and exercise. It's important to build the love, the passion and the satisfaction of performing first before introducing them to the possible importance of winning and medals and trophies in the future. So intrinsic motivation should be the starting point, and extrinsic factors or extrinsic methods of motivation could potentially be used as they become more experienced in their sport and perhaps as they move along the stages of learning. Okay, so far we've only really considered how motivation can affect someone who's performing in sport. It's also important for us to consider people like coaches and officials and how motivation can affect them and their involvement in sport. So there must also be a focus on non-performing individuals and how motivation can impact their behaviour. So for example, like coaches and referees and volunteers and people that are involved in the running and organisation of sport can use these types of intrinsic motivation. So they get enjoyment of the feeling of helping others. So the satisfaction of organising an event, the satisfaction of allowing children to perform small-sided games, the coaching of players to improve their ability. There's a large amount of intrinsic motivation to do that because of the feeling that you get inside as a coach and an official. Also, when we consider officials, it's quite important to really understand that some people actually desire the authority and responsibility of running or officiating an event. It makes them feel good about themselves, and they enjoy the responsibility and authority. This is arguably the most important out of the two types, particularly for volunteer coaches and officials, because of course they're not being paid for their services. So without intrinsic motivation and the will or desire to do this, we wouldn't have our volunteer coaches or officials. However, there are some types of extrinsic motivation. Some coaches and officials will be employed as a coach and official and will be paid for their position as a coach, and it could be their job. Referees can also be paid, and it can be a career for both coaches and officials. So therefore, the money might be a motivation for some coaches and officials, and also some coaches want to win competitions and awards. So when coaches get to a significant level, the top levels, they set their stalls out to go and win competitions, Premier Leagues, ICC trophies, Rugby World Cups. They set themselves out to go and try and win these awards, and that could be their motivation to be a coach. But as similar to performers, this only tends to happen at the very, very top level. When we think about the coaches and officials that work with our young children that are just starting sport, the most important factor of these two is generally the intrinsic motivation again. And as they move up in their level of performance, sometimes extrinsic motivation starts to come into play. Okay, so that's motivation in a nutshell, and this is the final slide of today's lesson. So what I'd like you to do here is, if you have to go back through the video, feel free to, but I would like you to write down any of the key terms that you've learnt today and try and write your own definition of what they might mean. There is two key terms in here that I'm going to introduce you to as we go through, but the main key terms we've covered already in the lesson. So I'd like you to try and write your own definition of the things that we have covered in today's lesson on motivation. Write them in the text box on the right hand side and submit your answer before we go through these key terms. So the first key term is motivation. This is the desire required to be successful, a driving force that makes you do something and decide how much effort to put in. Second is intrinsic motivation. So motivation that comes from simply doing the activity itself rather than to gain external rewards or prizes. Third one is extrinsic motivation. Motivating forces that come from outside the person and the activity, such as prizes, trophies, praise from others, or fame. So motivating forces that come from outside the person and the activity, such as prizes, trophies, praise from others, or fame. And the last two that we haven't covered as definitions yet, but we're going to cover them now, is reward. So something given to someone to recognize their achievement. So when you've achieved something that is well recognised, you can receive a reward. And the final one is an incentive, which is something that motivates or encourages someone to do something. So this could be an extrinsic factor of motivation. I could say to you, I want you to go out there and run 400 meters in less than a minute. And if you do that, I'm going to give you 20 merits. Quite simple. There's merits that are going to, maybe, depending on the personality of the performer, motivate them to be successful. And this is an extrinsic factor of motivation. So there are the key terms of motivation. We have what motivation means. We have the two types of motivation, so intrinsic and extrinsic. And then we have the two things here of reward and incentive. A reward is given when someone achieves something. An incentive is a motivating factor to make someone or encourage someone to do something. Okay, so they're the key terms from motivation and everything you need to know about motivation from the psychology part of this unit. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson, and make sure you come back for lesson 5, where we start looking at anxiety and arousal and how they can affect the performance in sport as well. So thank you for joining me again today, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.
Time is only time. Take it at your pace. Rushing into twilight.